everyone. I'm Melissa. Today we're going to talk about lean product management, and I talk a lot about, when I say lean, I'm talking a little bit about lean startup concepts. I'm also going to involve a little bit about lean concepts in there, but we're primarily going to be focusing on how do we build better products. And at a software conference like this, it's really important that we focus not only on how to optimize our development processes, but also how to optimize building really great things so we can get it out there faster. So how many of you are developers? Great. How many are product managers? Awesome. And what about UX designers? Somebody? Yeah, a few of you. Okay, great. So I am a product manager by trade, and I'm also a UX designer. Now I'm a consultant, and I help companies kind of integrate more processes into their integrate better processes into their product management teams and UX teams so that they can ship better products. I'm based out of New York, if you can't tell by my accent, and I talk very quickly, so hopefully we won't have any language barriers here. So to start things off, can somebody tell me what is the role of a product manager? How would you sum it up?
Interface between the market and development.
Okay, interface between the market and development. Good. Anybody else? What else?
Finding the most valuable thing, the most profitable thing to start next.
Yes, finding the most valuable thing. Okay. What else? What does a product manager do? What would you say?
Make sure that you're developing the right product to get the company where it wants to get to.
Anybody else?
Understand your customers' needs.
Understand your customers' needs. Yeah, that's really great. So when I also teach classes at General Assembly on product management, and one of the first things that we put up on the board when we're teaching this class is that a product manager is the voice of the customer. And when I look at this, I say, yeah, that makes sense, right? I would say product manager could be the voice of the customer, understanding their needs. They're really the person who fights for them. But as I stared at this a little bit longer and thought about how I was taught to be a product manager and how I see a lot of people actually doing product management processes now, I thought about, are we really the voice of the customer? And I think over time, we may have lost that focus. And that's really evident in our processes. So if we look at the traditional product development cycle here, we have define, design, develop, and deploy. So define is kind of what we own as product managers over here. We figure out what we should be building, what are our goals. We go and we spec it all out. We hand it off to the designers who go make it nice and pretty. We give it to the developers. And then we deploy at the end of the day. We ship it out to customers. Now, the problem with this process, though, is that at the beginning here, if we are even doing UX research, which some of us are not, we have some customer interaction. So we have a little bit of customer interaction here. We're finding out more about our customers. But as soon as we start speccing and we start designing and then developing, we have very, very little customer interaction. We don't get as much feedback. And it's not until we deploy and launch our product that we get the most customer feedback. And a lot of times that feedback looks like this. What are you giving me? Why did you give me this stuff? If you look at something like Facebook Messenger, spinning it off to a new app, a lot of people are like, why? Why are you making me do more things on here? Or my personal favorite very recently has been LinkedIn sending me blog notifications about my 800 connections who are writing blog posts about things I don't care about. I want to turn it off. I look like this cat. So what happens when you give your users something they don't want? Well, now you have to go all the way back to the beginning and start again. And that's really wasteful. So there's a reason why it's wasteful, and it's because we're building our products based off assumptions. We build them off what we think customers will like and not what they actually will like. So we need to change, and the way that we do this is actually very risky. This is risky for our business. Because while we were building things that people don't want, what are our competitors doing? Are they building things that people actually want? And we're wasting time doing this. So we need a new process to eliminate this risk. And that's this build, measure, learn cycle here that we talk about with Lean Startup. So build, measure, learn is just really an experimentation process. And what you do is you build a very small test, something that's small batch. You measure it with your customers, you get immediate feedback, and you learn from that, and you keep cycling it through. So it's not just a one-way process. It's something that you keep integrating to make your products better. Now, this takes a mind change shift, right? It takes another mindset to really get into this patterns of experimentation. Because right now, we're stuck in this build all the things mode. As companies, we just want to go build all the products and launch them out. And you can see that in the way that we reward all of our employees as well. We reward developers for writing lots of code. We reward designers for making lots of designs with stacks of wireframes. We reward product managers for coming up with a lot of ideas. And we need to change that focus, especially with product managers. With product managers, we kind of get into this little bit of a superhero complex where we're coming up with all these wonderful ideas and all these grand plans on what we could build. And sometimes we let our egos get in the way because we want control over the product. We want to make sure that we're building our ideas because we think we have the best ones. And that's not always the case. So as product managers, we need to take a step back and become the humble student. And we need to focus on learning. I would love to see companies reward people for learning about their customers, for really figuring out what their needs are and taking that time to step back and think. We need to put the focus more on solving problems and not just building features. But the way that we communicate what we actually want in a product manager is also a little weird. If you look at this, this is Google's ad for trying to hire a product manager in New York. And it says, the product management team works closely with our engineers to guide products from conception to launch. You'll work with Googlers from engineering, sales, marketing, and finance, to name just a few. And you'll work with world-class engineers and gather requirements. Cool. So I'm building products for my customers, but I'm not required to talk to my customers at all? That's a little strange. Typical Google. And the thing is, I went through a lot of posts like this, and they're all the same. This is what we ask for when we ask for a product manager. So we need to change the way that we communicate that. And we need to change the way we think about the traditional role of a product manager, because it usually involves these things. If I ask you, what does a product manager do on a daily basis? People will say, well, they determine the new features in the product vision, we gather requirements, we write a lot of specs, we interface with the teams, sometimes we go out and figure out what the customer's needs are. But we also manage product roadmaps. So what's wrong with this, though? No customers. There's a complete lack of customers there. There's a complete lack of focus on the customer and on the customer's problems. So we need to take a step back and really make sure that we're focusing on solving problems for our customers and not just building features. And that's the main difference between a lean product manager and a traditional product manager. So the problem, though, with trying to change into this lean product manager mode, though, is that a lot of our tools as product managers are not meant for this. If we look at things like product roadmaps or user stories or specs even, we find that a lot of these things really just focus on building and they don't focus on discovering problems. So what does a lean product manager do differently than a traditional product manager? Well, first off, a lean product manager works towards a goal instead of building arbitrarily. Now you might be sitting there saying, yeah, well, we have our KPIs and we're working towards a goal. But a lot of teams will write down their KPIs and then don't connect the dots to what they're building to get there. So I have a lot of teams that come up to me and say, well, we're going to build an iPhone app. We want to hire you on to come be like the freelance person to build our iPhone app. And you come and you say, okay, what are you building this for? Why are you building it? Well, we want to increase our user base. We want people to sign up because we built an iPhone app. Okay, so what's in the iPhone app? Well, we kind of got together and just brainstormed what our users will want, so we threw all that stuff in there. Okay, so what's the purpose of your iPhone app? What problem is it actually solving? And if you dig a lot deeper into these things, you find out that they don't solve a problem. So there may be some goal, but we're not actually working towards it. We're just building arbitrarily. So when we are a lean product manager, we need to take a step back, make sure our teams are aligned towards a goal, and every feature that we build goes towards it. So to give an example of this in practice, I was working for an e-commerce company a couple years ago. And the way that our e-commerce company worked is that we connected shoppers with celebrity sellers. So we would have people who were experts in fashion, home and design, food. We had like Bobby Flay on there, who would recommend products. And then customers could come on, shop on it, and buy it if they liked it. So I was a product manager, then had a team of developers on here. And we had to set a KPI and a goal to work towards. So for 1 quarter, our goal was to increase customer engagement. That was something that we really worked towards and made sure that every feature that we wanted to build was going to increase customer engagement. So now that we had our goal, we had to take the next step and figure out what problem could we solve to increase customer engagement. So that's the next thing. A lean product manager explores problems rather than gathering requirements. So if you think about gathering requirements, what do we usually do when we gather requirements? We'll go to users, or we'll go out to stakeholders, and we'll say, what do you need to build this? If we go to users and we say, what do you want? That's bad, and I think everybody knows that's the one cardinal rule of product management. Users don't know what they want, so we have to figure out what it is. And that's true, but if you go and ask users, what do you want? They're going to give you a list of features. Those are solutions, and that's not their job to come up with. But it is their job to tell you their problems, and that's what we should be prying for. Stakeholders, on the other hand, if we go to marketing or somebody and say, what are your requirements to launch this app, or what are your requirements to launch this software out to our customers, they're going to give us a list of solutions. And then everybody has a great idea. We have to incorporate that great idea into our solution. And we end up with a very complex hodgepodge of stuff that we ship out to our customers that doesn't necessarily solve their problems. Now, when we get these solutions too, from stakeholders, we usually just run with them and start making them user stories. Now, if you're a developer, you're very familiar with user stories, and product managers as well. Now, these didn't start off as evil, but I think they morphed into something that really doesn't solve the problems. I can't stand user stories anymore. So what we usually do with user stories is look at all these solutions, break them up into little stories, and throw them up on a board. But because it says, as a customer, I want or I need this, we automatically assume that's true. And a lot of times these aren't based on fact. They're not based on a lot of evidence that we have for it. So instead of using user stories, I've been focusing my teams in early stages of design around jobs to be done. So I like jobs to be done because it really focuses you on a certain situation for your customer. They have this motivation to solve a problem, and they'll get this kind of outcome. It's something that really aligns us more on problems than on solutions. So to give you an example of user stories versus jobs to be done, let's look at this. User story. As a user, I can save items to a wish list so that I can buy them later. Great. Job to be done story. When I find a product I like, but I'm not ready to buy it yet, it's my situation, I want to save the product for later so I can quickly come back and purchase it without searching again. This is more aligned around the problem than this. If we look at the user story, we already assume that we're going to build a wish list. We haven't really explored the problem further. If we look at the job story, we know that the action that they want to do is just to be reminded to buy this later. So there's many different solutions we could come up with. We might even just email them the product later. It'll show up in their inbox instead of making a wish list. There could be many ways to remind a user that. So when I'm starting off a new project or new features, I align my teams around jobs to be done story until we do figure out what users want. Then I revisit a user story to figure out how do we plan into the development. So back to our e-commerce store. We had our KPI that we wanted to increase. And our KPI was to increase customer engagement. Now we had to figure out what problem we could solve to actually increase that and get there. Well, one day, my CEO came up to me and he said, hey, Melissa, guess what? I said, what? He said, well, I was at dinner with our customers last week because we're taking some people out to dinner to ask them what they think about our site. And you know what they said to me? They said they don't think that the celebrities that we have selling the products are real. They don't think they're actually picking out those things that we're putting on there. I said, well, that's a huge problem because that's what our entire company is based off of. So we gotta solve that. So right there we had a problem that came from our CEO that we could start to address. And we knew we had to figure out a way to increase trust from our shoppers so that they believed that our sellers were real, because they were real. They were doing all that work. We weren't just picking things out willy-nilly. So how do we actually solve that? So we focused our team around that. When I'm shopping on your site, I want to know the expert is real so I can trust that the product is good. That was our job story that we focused on and that we wanted to go build. So now that we have a problem, it's time to experiment. And a lean product manager experiments instead of building preconceived solutions. A lot of times when we are faced with a problem or something to build, we just jump to the solution right away. Our first idea, we say, hey, yep, that's good, we can use an admin for this, let's just build it. Or settings, let's just put all the things in settings and build it. These are like typical features where you just go, let's go. And we don't actually take the time to experiment and test. And the problem with that is that our first idea is not always the best idea. And it doesn't necessarily mean that our users will like the first idea that comes into our head. So as lean product managers, we take a step back and we experiment until we get to the right solution, and then we build it fully. The problem, though, is that a lot of our tools don't allow us to experiment. And I think product roadmaps are a huge culprit of this. Product roadmaps, they're based completely on solutions. There is nothing about experimentation that are in there. And when you ask somebody if you have been experimenting, they say, well, it's not built into the product roadmap. That's because we build them very strangely. So when we build product roadmaps, usually we do this. We're like, okay, feature bucket, Google Maps integration. Hey, Mr. Developer, how long is it going to take us to build Google Maps integration? We haven't actually spec'd it out yet, but you should give us an estimate. Like 2 months, 5 people. Okay, cool, let's put that on the product roadmap. And we just put these buckets down with arbitrary times that we get based off development estimates. And then we make sure that we build them during that time. We always go back and say, okay, what's next on the roadmap? Let's go. And this is actually a lot of magic. There's a lot of magic that goes into building these roadmaps. One of the problems is those estimates. When we aren't speccing things, it's very hard for people to give accurate estimates on what we're going to build. But sometimes we build these roadmaps out 3 years in advance at large companies. How do you know what your customer is going to want 3 years in advance? Times are changing so fast that it's really hard to tell what they're going to want 3 years down the line from now. So we need to be able to respond to customers' needs. Also with estimates, though, we rarely ever budget in time for user research at the beginning. I've had a lot of places be like, okay, you have 1 week to do user research, design, and get that all ready to go to development. And at the end of that week, the sprint starts, so you better be ready. Okay, 1 week is not enough time usually for user research unless you have a SWAT team going in to interview customers. It takes time to schedule things for them, and it takes time to learn from them. So right there, we're setting ourselves up for failure. And then at the end, I have never seen a product roadmap actually schedule in time to go back and fix the things that are not working or to iterate on a product. It's usually, let's just start the next feature. So this is a bad way to start off figuring out what you're going to build. So I've been drafting up something I call the problem roadmap instead for making new features. So the problem roadmap works like this. First, you have a strategic vision on where your company is going, and you have goals. And you know there are steps that you have to take to get there, and those steps relate to your KPI. So as a company, we're going to want to increase our user base because we got to get to a place where we really rely on our users. Or as a B2B company, we need to increase engagement and bring on, stronger teams. So we got to bring in bigger teams to sell more seats, for example. These are all goals that you would be working towards. So we assign each team a goal to work towards in a specific time period. So usually companies like to go around quarters or years, what are our strategic initiatives for it. I'm breaking this up into quarters. You can break it up into whatever time frame works for the size of your company. Startups work really well for quarters. I work with a lot of startups. But larger companies, sometimes this could be months to years or bigger. So the whole point of it, though, is at the beginning of this time frame, what we do is we look at our goal, and we look at the problems that our customers have or that exist out there, and figure out which are the most important to solve right now that can help us get to that goal. So at the beginning, we prioritize our problems, and we take the most burning problem and put it on top. And we go out and we do some discovery and experimentation. We talk to our customers. We make sure that problem still exists. That's a big thing. That problem might have been solved. Make sure it still exists. And then you start experimenting. You start building small little MVP tests out there to see what they will respond to. And once you find something that they really like, then you start building and validating. You start working in your sprints. You start shipping it out to customers as fast as possible to get that feedback from them. And that's how you build it. Now, at the end of this build and validate, I know it looks a little short, and like we're starting here again with some more specs. You might have to take time to actually build out the complete feature sets. So an MVP is just a test, right? It's just an experiment. So when you're in this discover and experiment mode, you actually do have to build the whole thing out. So at that time, you can figure out what do we need to spec out, what are the features we need to build, and start building those and testing them with customers. You always have to get feedback in it, though. This I found really successful for really aligning our teams that I've been working with around goals and experimentation, instead of just jumping the gun and building things. It makes everybody take a step back, which is great. So how does this look in practice? Back to our e-commerce store. We were trying to figure out how can we solve this problem, that our users weren't trusting us, and that they didn't really think that the sellers were real. And talking to the CEO again, he was telling us that over dinner, they were saying, oh, well, we believe that those sellers are real on Twitter because they're tweeting about their dogs, they're tweeting about their cats and their barbecues and their lives, so obviously they have to be real. And he said, well, you know, what if we can take those like Twitter-like feeds and put them into our feed of products every day? So what if our sellers could write messages into our feeds? Then they'll think they're real because they're communicating with them. And we said, all right, that's a legitimate place to start. We should run an experiment on it and see if we can get some feedback from our customers. So our experiment was, will customers respond and engage better with our products if we put messages, personal messages from our sellers in the feeds? So what we ended up doing was running a short test over a week, and we split test this with one of our sellers called Shop a Frolic. And we put a personal message in the feed, and then we also left it without the message, and we A/B tested that to see what would engage more. So this showed up in users' feeds. We put Google Analytics on it to track what was going on. We were measuring if it sold more. We were measuring if people clicked on it more. We just really wanted to see the interactions. And what happened? Well, after a week, we go back, we look, and nothing happened. There was no change between this and the regular product. There was 0% change between how people interacted with the product. So we knew that people weren't engaging, but we didn't know why. So that was the next step that we had to do. So we brought in some users, we sat them down in front of the computers, we did some user research with them, we called them on the phone to talk about how they were using our site. And we kind of like slipped that message in there to see if they would respond to it. But what we found out from those users was that they were not using our site like we thought they were. No, they were not logging on to our homepage every day to see the products. They were coming through emails. Oh, so the majority of our users were skipping that page completely and not even looking at it. They were coming directly to the product page. So now we had a problem that we could add to the problem roadmap of trying to get people into the homepage instead of coming just through email and missing all our other products. But we learned something that we can actually go back and experiment on again. So we did another test. So this time we put the seller messages into emails. And we sent it out to, we split tested this again and sent it out to a section of one of the curators, one of the sellers who were really popular, to their fans. And we said, hey, like Gina Harney sent you a product today. And when you open it up, you saw her brief little message and an image. What happened this time? It was hugely successful. We ended up doubling our purchase rates off all these products, and we ended up tripling our open rates of these emails. It became a wildly successful email that kept running and running. So this was great. We finally found something that our users really, really responded to. But I didn't come up with this alone. And that's the next thing about a lean product manager. A lean product manager makes sure to involve the whole team instead of just working alone on PM Island. So a lot of times, and you can see this especially in some Scrum teams, which baffles me, people pull out product managers and keep them away from the developers or the designers and the rest of the team. And they go directly to the product managers and they say, we want to build something, and then the product managers hand it off to the team. But when you work that way, you're not surfacing everybody's ideas. When you're working in a software development team, especially Agile teams that are nice and when they're small and when you can sit with people, you get a lot of ideas surfaced, and you can involve people in the ideation process. So I always involve my developers in both user research and the ideation process to figure out what are the ideas, what are the things we can come up with so we can choose the best one. So as a lean product manager, your role is kind of to be vanilla ice. So you're going to stop, collaborate, and listen.
Stop it.
So our job now as product managers, as a lean product manager, is really to make sure the best ideas are surfaced from the whole team. That means involving stakeholders at the right time, getting their input, getting their research at the beginning, making sure they're feeding into the ideation process, not in the form of solutions, but in the form of knowledge and ideas on how we can work. It's making sure the developers can contribute as well and talk about what they understand of the customer, how we can build things. When I worked on this project at the e-commerce store, I had a developer and I was a product manager. I'm also a designer. So normally I would say we have to include our designers too, but I am the designer, so I'm not neglecting you. Include your designers. So it was me, the product manager, the designer, and then I had a developer working with me. And we worked very closely together. And the thing is, had I not, and the CEO too. The CEO was the one who came up with our first experiment. He's the one who brought to our attention the problem. If we had neglected them and I went off on an island and did this myself, I would have never gotten to where I was so fast. We would not have seen success. And my developer was crucial in this, because when you're working with in lean teams, developers are in charge of helping you figure out how can I get my experiments out as fast as possible. So for this, our developer came up with, let's put a CMS block up there. I can code it in a day, we can insert it into our feed, and we can reuse it to run tests all the time. And that was so fast. If I had to go figure this out on my own, I have no clue what I would have done. So developers, you're in charge of figuring out how can I make this the most minimum test? How can I not code everything in the world, but how can I get something out in front of customers as fast as possible? And that's invaluable. So because we were able to work as a team in this way, we were able to achieve our goal of increasing customer engagement, because we ended up solving a problem that we had with trust issues. So after we launched that email, our users started trusting us more. They started believing that those products were real. And our experiment there was failed the first time because of personal messages. Had we built those personal messages out completely the first time, we would not seen our success of 3 times open rates with 2 times revenue on this. And had we built that out the first time too, it would have taken us 5 developers, 8 weeks to build it. I had an estimate on that from them. So we ended up saving about $77,000 doing this more the lean way. And we ended up saving 1,600 hours of development time. That's 8 weeks across 5 people, across our best developers. And that's invaluable. And that's really what lean is about too. It's not about saving money and cutting costs, which is what you hear a lot from people who talk about lean startup. It's about the opportunity costs, because that's so much bigger than money. Because while you were out there building things that people didn't want, what was everybody else doing? What were your competitors doing? They were building things that people wanted. They wanted to buy it from them. So we really want to focus here on the opportunity cost. But to focus on this opportunity cost, we need to change the way we think about success in companies. You hear companies say things like always be shipping, or build all the things type modes. People really value the amounts of code that you do. They value how long you spend at your desk at these companies. And this is the wrong mindset to take people back and focus on experimentation. So we really need to think about, as a company and as a team, how do we measure success? What does success look like for us? And for me, success as a product manager means that my customers use our things. I don't want to be celebrating when I release something, when I deploy something. I want to be celebrating in a month when people are using my things and I can see the change. That's how we have to start focusing our teams on that. So if you're looking for somebody to be a product manager in the lean sense, these are the things that we really need to look for. We need somebody to discover customer problems by running experiments, who involve developers and the stakeholders during ideation, not coming up with things on their own, and focusing really on KPIs and reporting data and learnings, making sure you get cold, hard facts about how people are using things. That is really what makes a successful lean product manager. Because the whole point of product management is to deliver extreme value to the customers. So we need to go back to our roots and figure out why we became product managers in the first place, and that's to make customers happy. And that's it. Thank you.
Absolutely fantastic.